What's up, guys? I'm Aleksi Toivonen from the Evolve Fight Team. This is my friend and teammate, Kim Kyo-sung. We're going to show you control, striking, and advancing position from close guard. All right, first of all, when speaking about close guard, you have to realize the big difference when it comes to pure grappling and MMA is the value of position. And what I mean by that, if we are in regular BJJ or no-gi grappling competition or context, close guard is much more beneficial position for the bottom player because he can attack all different kinds of triangles, arm bars, leg attacks, sweeps, hit different kind of moves on me. For me, my main goal in pure grappling usually is to open his legs so I can start to advance position or attack different submissions. When it comes to MMA, the value of position is different, and that is because of striking. First thing I gotta do is control him. Control is the most important thing. Since I've gotten the fight to the ground, I want to keep him there. Usually in MMA context, he may want to attack me, or he may want to stand up and escape. And to prevent that, I have to control him. And the first thing to kill his attacks and escape attempts is I want to control his hips. And that's why I can't posture all the way up. I want to stay close to his hips, stay on my toes for eventual push from the bottom, and control preferably the inside position. Best case scenario, when I control both sides of his hips with my own pressure and both of his shoulders with my own arms. In order for him to attack me from the bottom, he needs to get his hip out or up. If he gets his hip out, he can start to attack arm bars, triangles, start to create space, and start to stand up. And I want to nullify that right at the beginning. So when I manage to take him down and get inside control, the first thing I focus on is heavy pressure on the hips, inside control, preferably even head to the chin. When my opponent starts to move his hips, my first goal is to reflan his hips. Because by keeping his hips flat on the mat, he cannot attack me proper if I have pressure on him and his hip is flat. So, control, he moves his hip, I replan the hip. He moves his hips, I replan and follow him, and not giving any chance for attack. The value of the inside position, it's not always mandatory. I can switch different ways. Sometimes I may even lose control, but preferably in optimal situation, I control inside of his arms or even double collar tie at the back of his head. If in MMA, if I only control his hips, he may even be able to elbow me from up to down to my head. But if I control from the inside, there is no chance for him to strike me proper, and I maintain control for the whole body, from the hips to the shoulders, all the way, preferably to the head. All right, moving on to striking. Now that we've achieved the basic control and we've killed the first eventual movements, the hip movement and the basic strikes from the bottom. When I'm controlling him here, my opponent is not only gonna flare his arms around, he's gonna try to control me too. In optimal situation where I'm on my toes, I have inside control and pressure on his hips, he doesn't want me to control this distance between us. Because when I can create distance, I can start to land harder strikes, which comes at a price, of course, for the control. But usually, his first option, when landed down, is to control me some way. Let's say a basic way where he just pulls me down and prevents me from creating space. When I start to strike from the inside position, I open my elbow, rotate my head outside to create a bit of space, pull my hand, and strike him over his arm. So, it's pulling me down, open the elbow, rotate the head, and strike over the arm. If I want to create power in my punches, I need to rotate my body more and put more weight to the strike. So, my opponent is controlling me, he's controlling my posture. I open the elbow, rotate my head outside, and strike heavy and accurate punch to the chin. I may be able to land one or even two strikes before he usually starts to hip out, and I have to regain the control. Best case scenario, only one punch is enough. Next thing, after landing the first initial strike, control my head, open, rotate, I land the first strike. Usually, if he will not hip out, he will try to defend himself by covering up. At this case, it's pointless to try to punch his arm. I want to strike the body or grab a wrist control, maybe elbow over, or pin his arm against his body so I can strike freely to an open target. There's no point of smashing his guard unless it's just to stay active. I need to look where I strike heavy, and strike accurate. So one more time, he's controlling my head, open, I rotate my head, strike over. If he defends, grab the wrist, maybe land an elbow, cross grip, land another strike, hip out, he starts to escape, I regain control and find the inside position again. Next up, once we have established a dominant striking control on the ground and controlling his hips and his upper body, if he cannot attack me, he cannot escape. In a traditional measure, he cannot attack submissions, cannot stand up. Usually what he starts to do is he's gonna try to create space, even risking a little bit of getting struck, because that's the only way he's gonna get out of the bad position. So I am here, I've already landed a couple of strikes. Kim has tried to hip out, maybe lift his hips up, and I've killed all his attempts. I still have inside control, I have hip control, and I am winning the fight, controlling the situation. Usually, if Kim can sneak even one hand inside, he will start to push and create space in order to stand up or create more space to start another attack. Hand inside, make space. Now, when he starts to make space and hip out, instead of trying to hug him against his frame, I'm gonna hip in and start to stand up. When he pushes, I'm gonna start to stand up. I'm gonna pinch my knees together so I will still maintain hip control. And I want him to carry my weight. Even no arms, even if he has no arms, his hips, his back, and his core is carrying all my weight. Best case scenario, even his hands are occupied for making space. And my hands are still available to strike him. And usually at this case, he will try to protect. When we can fall back, find the inside control again, and we're back at the same loop we did previously. So, again, I'm controlling here, I'm dominating, Kim starts to push me away. I put pressure on his hips, pinch my knees, hip in, and I want to create heavy pressure here. If I am standing like this or just hip in, it's easy for him to drop his hip and start rotating or start to create a scramble. I want to stay heavy all the time. Knees pinch, heavy on his hips. Now, even if he starts to rotate, it's going to be much more harder and slower. And then I have the time to fight my way back inside to a dominant control. Whole sequence so far. I control, he pushes away, stand up, heavy, pinch the knees, strike over the guard. He starts to protect himself. I drop back into proper control. The third problem we can have when standing up is he brings his foot to my hip and he starts to kick me away. When I'm standing, he pushes me away, I start to stand up, he starts to bring foot to my hip. to create even more space. In this situation, there's a simple basic rule how I can avoid this. I never want the bottom of his feet to touch me. So if this happens, I don't need to start immediately passing or back out from the pressure. I will simply pull back up and maintain all the pressure on his hip. Even if he brings the other leg, I can pull back up. I can push in wherever, as long as the bottom of his foot does not touch my body. Even here, I can still maintain the pressure and strike. Worst case scenario, he gets his foot here, starts to push back. I will control his ankle and stand over him to kick the leg or to re-enter with a strike. One more time so far. Starts to push me away. I will stand here, create pressure on the hips, strike. He puts the bottom of his foot to my hip. I will pull back up, keep striking, brings another foot to my hip, starts to push inside, strike, maybe drop back to the guard and get inside control. The last thing we're gonna work on is advancing the position. There are multiple ways how I can advance from close guard to side control, half guard, more dominant versions of close guard with different kinds of grips, collar ties, body locks, and different attacks. But we're gonna go only a few very, very basic controls, which if handled correctly, can work in a very high level competition situation. The first one we're gonna do is I am controlling in the previous way, preferably down with inside control, and I'm staying on my toes all the time. Maybe he pulls me down from my head, open, strike, he protects, push down, strike, find back the inside control. Now, what he's gonna do, he is going to open his own guard. Now, remember, like I said in the beginning, I don't need to open his guard. If I can kill his attacks and his offense and dominate with my own striking from the guard, it's usually him who wants to get up, who wants to get away and escape this situation because he has to do something. He's getting beat up. So he will open the guard and try to create something. And I will use this moment as my own advantage. When he opens the guard, and foot on the hip, and tries to kick away, I will, same side leg that he's trying to push, I will kick back, rotate my hip, step over into half guard. You can put your own foot under the thigh, as I prefer, or you can even lock down the half guard. Control, open, strike. He opens the guard, puts the foot on the hip. I will kick back. The force that he uses to push me down, push my leg, I will use the same momentum to kick back, rotate the hip, step over, and lock down to half guard. It doesn't matter really, do you end up in half guard or half butterfly, as long as you maintain the control. And preferably, once I step here, I lock down the half guard so he cannot start to scramble, and of course, reflank his hips. Because now once again, I'm dominating the hips, I'm dominating the inside control, or I have the opposite side underhook. One more time. Controlling the inside position, open, I strike over the guard. Grab the wrist, strike again. He starts to hip out, brings the foot on my hip. I use the momentum of his push to kick back, rotate my hip, step over to half guard, maintain inside control, and reflank his hips. Now, I've advanced from full guard or closed guard to half guard while still maintaining the same hip control, the same pressure, and everything that I had in the beginning. And even if this move fails, there is not a lot of risk that can occur during the movement. Even if I step and my opponent somehow blocks the leg, or I fail with the step, I usually end up back into close guard. There's not a lot of risk involved. Very high value, low risk movement. The second movement we're gonna do is when I stand up to strike, as previously shown. Pull down. I open, strike above, control the wrist, strike, maintain inside control. He starts to push away, I stand up, put pressure on his hips, and start to strike over. Now, when his guard is open here, usually when he tries to bring a knee to prevent me from punching him, I will sneak my hand underneath his ankle, lift his foot up, and I maintain hip pressure all the time. Rotate and fall down straight into side control. Again, other side. Open, strike. He starts to push me away. I will stand up, create pressure on his hips. Strike, strike. He brings the knee in between. I bring my hand under his ankle. Rotate, and I turn my hips at the same time as I rotate to keep the pressure and stay close to him. Because the more distance, the easier it is for him to scramble away. Because there's a lot of space between our upper bodies. If he scrambles, I need to be able to stop his movement from the hips or follow him. I rotate and drop down straight to dominant side control. Another variation we can do or add to the previous movement, we strike, push away, stand up, lock down the hips. I strike from over, he opens up, go under the ankle, hip in, rotate, and as I pass back to side control, I come with the opposite side hand to strike, preferably between the guard. And then I pass to side control. With this punch, I can create tremendous power since he's down on the canvas and I'm already rotated to the opposite side. He cannot usually see the strike coming. My hip is in, and when I rotate, it's fast and I can drop all my weight straight down to strike him. And then advance to side control. You see a lot in situations like this, people throwing the legs and trying to dive in. And it works sometimes, but there's a huge risk when throwing the legs away that the opponent scrambles out of the situation and I have to follow him. So, preferably, when I'm here, I rotate, I try to stay close to him here. Because when I land the strike, even if he starts to turn, it's easy for me to drop down on top of his hips, get a proper control, drag him back down. We can move to a more dominant position, to different submission attacks, or try to attack the back and advance toward finishing the fight. Thank you guys. To summarize, we went through how to control close guard, how to strike from close guard, and how to advance position to half guard and side control. First, we killed the hips, preventing the opponent from attacking us from the bottom. Secondly, controlled the inside position and struck over the arm. Once the opponent starts to force space, we stood over the opponent and started raining down strikes. If the opponent opens the guard while we're standing, we pass straight to side control. If he opened the guard while we were still on the ground, we stepped over the leg and locked down to half guard.